Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo. Coming up on the show this week, mutated aliens are taking over the universe, and it's up to you to clip them into oblivion with Darkspore.
And Thor swings his mighty hammer, and we check out if it's just another stormy movie tie-in.
Hex, do you remember what this is?
Oh, it's one of those virtual pet thingies.
Indeed it is, and we meet a gamer who's made it her life passion to collect as many of them as possible. But first, can you guess the game for this week? I've already killed this one.
Already?
Yeah.
No lame prize this week, Barjo?
Actually, Hex, I think we should give a prize to Dean Maddock, who sent us in this wonderful zombie who was apparently inspired by Brian the Zombie, our old friend. Now give that back and give it back and go read the news.
I just want
to... Don't touch.
Good game.
PlayStation 3 users are now enduring their third week without access to the PlayStation Network, following an illegal intrusion on Sony's servers. The personal information of over 70 million users was stolen in the hack. Sony is offering PS3 customers a welcome back package of freebies, as well as assurances that the service will now be made safer than ever after a mandatory system update. Sony Online Entertainment's Station.com was also breached in the attack, affecting users of DC Universe Online and Free Realms, with another 13,000 credit card numbers and bank account details stolen, pushing the number of affected Sony customers to over 100 million. The attack has prompted the Australian government to push for new privacy laws that will force companies to immediately disclose details and notify customers on privacy breaches. Ubisoft has launched a new Paris-based division dedicated to developing film and television from their successful game franchises. There's no confirmation on what Ubisoft Motion Pictures' first project will be, but a questionnaire sent to a select group of gamers hints that either Ghost Recon or Assassin's Creed are likely candidates. The division will be headed up by Jean-Julien Baronet, former CEO of filmmaker Luc Besson's EuropaCorp. The Australian version of upcoming RPG The Witcher 2 has been censored in order to pass classification. The contentious material involved only one scene in which the player is offered sex as a reward for completing a quest. This would have placed the game into the non-existent R category and led it to being banned. A change has been made so that the player's character will now automatically reject the erotic offer, bringing the game in at MA 15+.
I was raised to love the truth, and I refuse to sit here and listen to this hogwash.
Melbourne-based developer Firemint, the studio behind Flight Control and Real Racing, has been acquired by Electronic Arts. No new titles were announced as part of the deal, and no details of how much the acquisition cost were revealed, but it is further proof that EA is taking a more aggressive stance into the mobile gaming market.
Good game.
You may have seen the hammer-swinging Chris Hemsworth at the movies, but now you have the chance to be him in Thor God of Thunder, the movie tie-in game which we've been playing on the PS3.
When you're ready.
As the mighty god, you'll be wielding the fabled Mjolnir, Thor's legendary hammer, as you try to stop waves of frost giants from taking over Asgard. The cast of the film have returned to voice the game as well, with the exception of Anthony Hopkins, but his voice-alike is pretty good.
The Jotun are contained on miserable Niflheim. What will war achieve?
It's not the same. Gotta have the hop. This is instantly recognizable as a God of War clone. You'll feel right at home with the control setup, there's abilities and grapples and smashing baddies. It all feels very similar. In addition to this, you can also call upon the power of lightning, thunder, and wind when your meter is full. And combining all of this makes for some pretty decent combat.
Yeah, and depending on who you're fighting, each elemental power has its own advantages and weaknesses too. And you can go upgrading these abilities, along with adjusting Thor's general health stats and his hammer as you collect the Nordic equivalent of souls or orbs or whatever it is that you usually collect in these sorts of games.
Yeah, there's a very been there, done that feel with this game. It knows the games it's modelling off, and it sticks to that quite clearly.
Weak Jotun.
Grappling and throwing enemies will yield health and XP. And the hammer, despite being a rather heavy, bulky weapon, is wielded by Thor with agility and force. And I quite enjoyed bringing the smack down on these frosty beasties, Hex.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there's a pretty decent move list, and by spinning it really fast, it even becomes a shield. And I really dug the hammer throw as a ranged attack. I think particularly with all the ice enemies and crystal smashing you do in the game, the hammer is a really satisfying weapon to have at your disposal. Enemies I felt were all pretty stock standard though. I mean, you can predict their heavy attacks and there's armoured beasties which take a little bit of extra effort to take down. But generally, you'll be facing waves of baddies of each sort, often indicating when they can be grappled for an impressive takedown.
The boss fights got a bit repetitive though, Hex. Often I'd get a serious case of deja vu when being faced with pretty much the same boss in the same setting with just more weak points, and that made me yawn a bit. But the ice setting is a surprisingly fun landscape to adventure in with all of its icy storms and cliffs, and they managed to make the fighting here feel really powerful without any blood, you know, it's just lots of shattering and smashing, and that's good.
Yeah, it's a decent looking game for the most part, but occasionally I found it would pixel out on me in my shield animation or not properly render certain textures of ice and snow, and it just looked really sloppy. And while the character likenesses are pretty good for the most part, Loki in the game looked eerily like Brent Spiner to me.
Disappointingly, there's not much in the way of puzzles here. And the best kind of these action-adventure games always have those puzzles to help the pacing and give you something to think about, but here it's pretty much just move an object here or use the thumbsticks to do some ancient godly hacking. There is a hint system which you can use by pressing down on the D-pad, but you don't really need to use it.
No, unfortunately outside of fighting baddies, there's not a whole lot to do, and I always resent being given the task of having to clear a certain number of enemies from an area before I can progress. I mean, I associate that kind of grindiness with World of Warcraft, and I find it a bit uninspiring when you're told to take down X number of ice turrets, or kill 25 dudes in a certain area, or deflect ammo of X number of ghouls. I mean, can't I just fight things until they're dead?
I don't mind it so much, you know, it gives me a sense of progress in an area, but it was hard to stay interested in this game because besides the opening cinematic, the story is quite boring. It doesn't really match the impressive scale of the storyline in the film.
As Guardians, the Jotun have come for what is rightfully ours.
Wrong, Jotun. You've come here to die.
I just wish they'd spent a bit more time developing this game.
That's just it, isn't it? I mean, time is always a defining factor with these movie tie-in games, and they just don't seem to be given enough of it to really make the game engaging enough. And with those worrying graphical issues, it really comes across as rushed.
At least it's not as bad as the Iron Man game, which I'm still having nightmares about. It is hard to recommend this though, because there are so many other great games in this genre, like the God of War series, or Darksiders, or even Dante's Inferno, and I think you have to be a real big Thor fan to get much out of this, so I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It's 5.5 from me.
My first gaming love affair was Williams Defender, and it was, I used to go, you know, to swimming baths and the ice skating rink with my parents and so on, and then when I got a bit older with a small group of friends. And to me, I didn't care about the skating, I didn't care about swimming. I just wanted that to be over so that I could go into the bit where the bar was, where they had Williams Defender. They had Space Invaders, but I think I must have been a little bit young because I remember looking at that and thinking, it doesn't look that great. Defender, with all of its particle stuff, you know, you blew up the guys and they went thump. That sound, well, the thump-thump when you blew them up. The grinding sound when you put the coin in, just, you know, absolutely, still even now. I've resisted buying a Defender arcade machine because I don't want to spoil the sort of rose-tinted memory of what it meant to me, that game.
It's been a while since we had a look at a bunch of iOS games, and there's been a few that have caught the attention of our eager little fingers. So Hex, first up I think we should start with Tiny Wings.
Tiny Wings is another simple score attack game with only one control. Simply tap the screen to dive and release to fly. The aim is to go faster and further by timing your taps perfectly to reach the farthest island you can before the sun sets.
At first you'll probably find yourself just diving straight into the side of a hill, but it's timing those dives perfectly. That's what this game is all about.
You start off with a 10 times multiplier, which goes up every nest level you gain, and you need a high multiplier to get a decent score. But to level up your nest, there's always 3 challenges to complete, and some of them are pretty tricky. And Badge, hunting down these little objectives is what kept me coming back. But let's talk about the visuals for a second, because those hand-drawn graphics were just gorgeous.
Yeah, I liked how the contours of each island are different, and how it changes each day that you play. I thought Tiny Wings is a well-polished and beautiful game, but I would have liked a bit more to do, so I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I'm actually still playing this badge. I think it has that addictive quality that's just perfect for mobile gaming, and I'd even go as far as to say that it's up there with greats like Fruit Ninja and Angry Birds, so I'm giving it 9. Next up, Kami Retro. You play as Kami, well, 4 Kamis, and your goal is to get safely to the end of the level. Like lemmings, the Kamis will walk automatically. Swiping in the opposite direction will make him turn around, and swiping diagonally will make him jump, and there are objects like bounce pads and fans that you have to use to get Kami to the end, and that's really about it.
It's not an easy game though. Object placement is critical if you want to get the stars in each level. You'll find yourself experimenting and combining objects to get to the finish line. The controls are a bit tricky though, aren't they, Hex?
Yeah, I often found myself jumping when I wanted to change direction, and you actually have to swipe on Kami to get him to respond, and quite often I'd be a little bit off and he'd end up falling to his doom. Also, having to do the same moves for each Kami in every level gets a little bit tedious.
I thought the graphics were quite interesting. It can be a little bit tricky to work out what you can actually land on until you test it out. Everything's got quite a colourful 3D look to it, but I still think it's a little bit messy.
I think the music and the sound effects really nail that old school vibe, although it probably will drive you insane after a little while. But it's the imprecise controls that really let this down for me, so I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Look, there's plenty of levels and characters you can unlock, and the platforming's not bad, so I'm giving it 6.5. Next up, Collision Effect. In this game, you need to clear the screen of all the Zibbles by colliding coloured ones together, whilst avoiding collisions with other colours. Activating a Zibble by tapping it will attract all other Zibbles of the same colour directly to the Zibble you tapped. I could say Zibble all day, Hex, but I think we should call them orbs.
I think so too. In Collision Effect, there are 2 modes. The first is Action Mode, which is a score attack game with 3 difficulty levels to choose from. It feels kind of like a cross between Geometry Wars and Osmos, where increasingly difficult waves of orbs will fly through until you lose.
I thought this got the heart pumping in a really good way. It's kind of like Flight Control Stress, but by 1,000. Letting the orbs fly too far without activating them will cause chaos on the screen, and it's so important to know which orb to tap and which colour to clear first. You have to think quick, otherwise you'll end up with this. And then there's Puzzle Mode.
This is brain-bending goodness. Here, all the orbs are stationary until you activate them. It's all about tapping the right orbs at just the right time, and some of the levels really require you to slow things right down so that you can time your moves correctly. Like all the best puzzle games, it forces you to think in a completely different way, and while it will take you a while to get through the 60 or so levels on offer here, I still wish there were more. Anyway, final thoughts?
I love this game, Hex. It's a simple idea executed beautifully, and the music just rounds it off to a 9 out of 10 rubber chickens from me.
You know, I would have been happy to buy either Puzzle Mode or Action Mode as separate games, but here you get both. I think it's just great. I'm giving it 9.
Next up, Hunters, Episode 1. A turn-based strategy game with some RPG elements. You control a small team of mercenaries carrying out the galactic dirty work for the big bad corporations of the 30th century. In my opinion, you can never have too many space pirate games.
As you level up your mercs, you'll get to use better weapons and armour, as well as give them a talent or perk like increasing their accuracy. You can also buy and sell equipment and even purchase new mercenaries. Badge, I like a game with RPG elements, but for me this was all just a bit slow.
Yeah, the leveling is a bit slow, but I don't mind a slow-paced game like this. The problem I have with it is that you're just so much tougher than all of the enemies. If you look at Advance Wars, you know, which has similar elements, you have to play around at least maybe once or twice before you can get through it, especially on the later levels. But here, it's just really hard to actually lose, and I'm finding that with a lot of these strategy games on iOS. Really cool ideas, way too easy.
I don't know, I think it's just more of a forgiving game than we're used to, and I think for a mobile game it needs to be.
It's breeding noobs, and then I'm going to be an old man complaining about how games, you know, used to be hard and good.
I think you're already that guy, Barjo. But you have to admit the graphics did look great. Even when you zoom in, the textures are still sharp and you see some subtle animations. We should note though that you're capped at level 2 for the free version, so you'll have to cough up some cash for more levels, and also it won't work on old 3G iPhones.
Hex, I would happily pay a lot more for a game like this if it just had challenge. You know, I want this kind of game on this kind of platform, but no one has done it right yet. So it's also a bit cheeky to give you free gear for clicking ads, urging you to click Bieber's face. Bieber's face? Bieber's face to get free gear. I'm not sure if it's worth it. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Well, I definitely think there's replay value here with new missions out every day, and I really enjoyed the level design, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10.
Good game.
All right, Badge, time to crack open the Ask Good Game inbox. Let's start with this legal question from the Goth Rat in Hobart, Tasmania.
Hey guys, love the show, and I wanted to know if you could confirm something for me. So, is it illegal to import the new Mortal Kombat game that's currently refused classification? Well, Gothrat, the simple answer is yes. It is illegal to import refused classification material, and Australian customs are on the lookout for copies of the new Mortal Kombat game being imported.
You will not see the end of this day.
It is possible that a copy could get through customs without them noticing, but if they find it, you could face fines as great as $110, wait for it, $1,000.
But a little known fact is that you can actually write to your Attorney General seeking permission to import refused classification material.
Yeah, I mean, we've never tried it ourselves, so we have no idea how likely getting special permission actually is.
Kratos wins.
All right, moving on now to this from Pants in Bendigo, Victoria.
Hi, Barjo. You were wondering what those balloon things in the back of the General's unit are in Shogun 2? They're silk capes called arrow catchers that were historically used to entangle arrows to stop you getting one in the back. They also fluttered around, making your back a hard target for some unfriendly horse archer.
Well, Pants, thanks for clearing that up. We should rename this segment to Answer Good Game.
Well, moving on to this one from Justin in Gosford, New South Wales.
I recently went to purchase Fortress Craft from Xbox Live and couldn't find it on the marketplace anywhere. Was it not released here, or am I just not seeing it? Thanks, Justin. Well, Justin, Fortress Craft was not released here because it's an Xbox indie game and we simply don't get access to those in Australia as they don't get ratings and so can't be sold, at least not for now. And on that note, we're out of time. Hex, back to the studio. Fast as you can.
So, we can't take that.
Good game.
Do you collect anything, Hex?
Yes, I do. I collect swords. My latest is Ezio's sword from Assassin's Creed 2.
Nice.
What about you?
Oh, I like figurines, and I can't resist anything that's original. Much like Meg, who is a collectomaniac when it comes to anything Tamagotchi.
Hi, I'm Meg. Welcome to my Tamagotchi obsession. The Tamagotchi is a small electronic pet. Tamago means lovable egg, and Gotchi is short for watch. Basically, you care for, do all the functions you would with a regular pet, but in a small package. One of the reasons I started collecting them was I'd never really had the original Tamagotchi as a kid. In 1997, it was huge. Everyone had one. They were playing with them in school. They got banned. And I never really had that. I didn't get mine until later. That was my first drive to go and buy an original Tamagotchi. Like most things anyone collects, you sort of just get a passion about it. And once you've got that passion about it, you go for it. The first generation of Tamagotchis was released on the 23rd of November 1996 in Japan. It's fairly basic, 7 different functions. Each one of those functions, you've got the feed function, so you give it a main meal of sweets. Depending on what you give, will make a different character in the end. Exercise, this one's only got one really basic little game in it where you have to guess which side it's going to look and push the correct button that goes with it. I think it was 1998, they introduced the touch screen and connectivity. It's not a touchscreen in the traditional sense where you actually push and it reacts to that. Mostly uses the buttons, but the interesting thing is it will have certain stimulus where it will decide it's going to do something and your reaction is to either tap on the screen or on the side of the shell and it will react to that. And in 2004, they re-released it with the Tamagotchi connection. This one's got more functions, more games, which is the really important thing. It's got the IR, which lets it connect with other Tamagotchis and with the Tama market. From there, it's just built up. You know, we've got the whole new ones with the LCD screen. It's full colour. Graphics are so much better, so many more functions. It's just grown in leaps and bounds since that initial little Tamagotchi. What I find special about Tamagotchis is basically I can't take my pets everywhere I go. They're just really fun to have with you. I mean, yeah, you can have most of your handhelds with you, but none of them just sit nicely in your pocket. And it's something you can play a game whenever you feel like it. You know, you're sitting on the bus, it's there, you know, no matter what, you've got something you can fiddle with, you can play with. I really enjoyed just caring for them as well. I mean, like, that's me, I'm a caring person, I like to look after things. My collection at the moment, it's fairly large. There's over 200 pieces. I've kind of stopped counting since 200. And maybe 50 different books, game titles. Most people's reaction to the size of my collection is, oh my God, do you play with them all? No, no. I play with most of the ones in my collection. They've all had to work through. I think that's my real stance on toys. They're there to be played with. The most interesting piece I have is probably the Tama market. It is the size of a dinner plate. Only 3,000 were made worldwide, not available in shops, not available outside of Japan. It was produced to go in a shopping centre. Basically, kids could come in, buy their food, get their Tamagotchi some food. It was never meant to be sold, and I got myself one. My Tama market's also known as my Flavor Flav Tamagotchi because I can wear it around my neck like a big clock. I basically taught myself electronics through my Tamagotchis. You know, I've had them for years when I was a little kid. Always interested what made them go. From there, I basically learned to clean and fix them all up. I also do what's known as a debug, which is basically you make yourself a little Franken Tamagotchi. You crack it open and activate a lot of the junk programming, which then becomes available to use. My own personal holy grail for Tamagotchi collection is the prototype. For the original Tamagotchi, a small batch of different prototypes were released. Were never used, never available, and don't know if they're available still, but that's my goal. I want to get one of those.
Darkspore isn't a sequel to Spore, it's a loosely affiliated follow-up and an entirely different type of game.
I do enjoy a good RPG clickfest, Barjo, so I was really looking forward to this. Players take the role of the last of the progenitors, ancient alien genetic engineers who seeded the universe with life and then tampered with it to create the perfect weapons.
Strangely enough, one of the experiments went wrong and resulted in the Darkspore. Horrific mutants that infected the rest of the galaxy with mutation minds that turned everything into more Darkspore. Or something like that.
The story is pretty forgettable and also a little bit stupid, but you know, a good click RPG doesn't necessarily need a good story. I mean, we play them for the monster killing and the loot, and this game has both in spades.
Power resilience low.
Yes, you can play it in co-op, and that's where the real fun is at. But having said that, in single player, you do have to use your abilities a bit more effectively. As a progenitor, you control a small army of genetic heroes, monsters with unique abilities. You can field 3 genetic heroes in a squad. Only one can be active at any time, and you'll be switching between them when one gets on low health or has no health, or if the situation requires it, such as if your team needs some more heals or maybe a better tank.
Ally squad member has perished.
Managing the variety in your squad and mixing up the classes is key to tough situations, but we found in co-op it wasn't really that hard, and you can just kind of spam your way through most of it.
Each of the genetic heroes is linked to a genesis, basically an element around which all of your power is based. And there are a few different classes of hero as well. Sentinels are the tanks designed to soak damage. Ravagers are fast melee units. And Tempests are the ranged units, healers and pet-using heroes. Each hero has access to 4 powers, their basic attack, 2 special abilities, and a group ability that is shared with each hero in the unit.
I like the idea of the group powers. It kept things nice and fresh, and pretty soon you work out your favourite abilities, so you work out a battle plan and just use those. But if you are playing with noobs, you're going to have to pick up the slack, which means you might not get to use the abilities and the heroes you actually want to play with all the time.
In the campaign, you'll work your way through 6 worlds, and each level features monsters from 2 Genesis. Heroes take double damage from Darkspore of the same Genesis or colour, so you'll need to juggle your heroes or you'll go down fast. Especially in those horde moments where enemies are just thrown at you constantly.
Each level has a bunch of objectives to give you something extra to think about and aim to achieve for, such as killing a percentage of Darkspore or finding certain items. There's also a nifty gambling system in the campaign. When you finish a level, you can choose to take a reward or not take it and continue on for the chance of getting 2 rewards of a slightly higher level. As you level up, you can purchase the ability to chain together more levels, and I quite like this mechanic, Hex. I think it kind of works.
Yeah, I think it's only worth doing in co-op though, because otherwise the risk might be a little bit too high, but unless you're seriously awesome.
Like this guy. Nah, I'm rubbish.
Between missions, you can go back to your Progenitor spaceship and tinker with your heroes, changing their looks and fiddling with proportions and equipping new items or body parts. Gear ranges from weapons through to new hands and feet, but you can only equip 1 item in each slot. It's not as much fun or as flexible as the Spore creature creator, but there is enough to customize, and give all of your creatures boobs if you want.
Or wang sex. Every good tank needs one. So many wangs. On paper, everything in this game works. You know, it's a solid RPG base, and the creature creator is a nice touch, I think, and it looks pretty good, but it felt like it lacked something. It never really came together for me.
Yeah, it's almost as if they sort of decided that they wanted to make a Diablo-style game, but then the game itself lacks any real inspiration, and I just didn't really find much to attach to. There are no memorable characters to speak of, and you can't even really have a favourite genetic hero, and if you do start to favour one, you'll probably only use them half the time anyway because of the whole Genesis thing.
Yeah, and it's pretty basic storytelling too. It's just cutscenes with a monotone voiceover, and I think that voiceover was just terrible, Hex. It made me fall asleep at the keyboard.
This is the home of Quantum Genesis. It was here Progenitor Zella made his life's work.
Also, I think there's a bit too much reliance on random chance in the levels. The genesis of each Darkspore is set for each campaign mission, but the monsters themselves can have random abilities like armor or damage reflection. So there's no way of knowing if you have heroes capable of overcoming obstacles until you actually come to them. Not such a big deal in co-op, but in single player that can become a real problem.
The loot is a little bit too random too. Each hero has a particular statistic its powers are based around, rendering other stats pretty much useless. Most gear and body parts are also linked to a genesis, so you won't necessarily be able to gear up the heroes you need to complete a mission. There is a shop where you can buy some weapons, but that's it.
Yeah, I went back to some earlier levels to grind it out a bit, but there's a problem in Darkspore where if you beat a level, when you go back to it, it seems the enemies are always randomized. Each zone does have a main Genesis set, so you can predict to avoid that one so you don't take double damage from that particular one, but the others are so randomized that you just can't have a perfect team going in that's completely out of your control, and you can't go back and change it either, or it'll just be randomized again.
I also think that for all the technology under the surface of the game, Darkspore is actually pretty unsophisticated. Aside from adding on extra body parts, there's never much of a sense of progression. It's a matter of clicking and just hoping you don't encounter a beastie you can't beat. Or, you know, matchmaking with a bunch of noobs. That being said, though, the matchmaking system is pretty good, and we almost always found a good game.
You know, I think it is that lack of progression that made me want to put this down more than anything else. You do unlock new heroes as you level up, but I just found gearing them up a bit tedious. And in a game that's all about collecting gear and clicking on stuff to get stuff, when that's boring, you know, there's not much long-lasting appeal. There is PvP, but we haven't spent that much time with it because it just felt like 2 people sitting in front of each other, spamming each other until one fell over. I'm sure there is strategy there, but it was just all a bit too dull for me to want to find that strategy and craft it. So I'm giving this 5.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
That ability is not ready.
Yeah, it's like the more I played, the more unfocused it felt, and constantly swapping between heroes made them feel a little bit disposable and just lacks that sense of reward. Darkspore lacks a certain charm, and I also felt the ship interface really wastes your time, so I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So gamers, did you guess the game for this week?
You have to go back 20 years for this one. It was called RoboSport and was developed by Maxis Software. Maxis and its founder, Will Wright, are best known for giving us the massively successful SimCity and Sims franchises.
And Darkspore was their latest game. Well, that brings us to the end of another show, gamers, but next week we'll be reviewing the parkour-inspired FPS, Brink.
And the very adult Wii shooter, Conduit 2.
Thanks for live tweeting with us, tweeters, and don't forget, if you want to drop us a line, you can go to the Good Game Facebook page or the forums at our website. Till next time, gamers, Hex out.
Bud you out.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Came right over the top there.
Bam. That's the noise it made, didn't it?
No,
I said it. Whoosh.